So is duct tape your most important tool in the recording studio?
It's definitely up there.
You have a lot of stuff here. How many years of accumulated cables and gadgets?
That would be the oldest piece of equipment I probably have is an RCA ribbon mic from the 1940s. That was from the CBS 30th Street Studios where Bob Dylan and people like that were.
So when you were a kid, were you a geeky kid, you know, always gadgets, building things?
No, but what I would say is when I was pretty young, you know, I heard rock and roll and it was like, wow. And I would go to the record store, you know, if I made a little money or something, and Mom, can you take me to the record store? Well, I'm going out that way next Tuesday and we can go, you know, and I'd go to the record store and I would get a record and I'd open the shrink wrap and I would read all the names and I would say, I want to be one of these people. I didn't even, as a kid, I didn't even know what I was going to do. I just said, whoever does this, this is what I want to do. It was really always about being on a record. You know, I became a musician and it was about playing music, but it really started with records. My dad had a lot of red vinyl fantasy jazz records, that label Fantasy. And I remember looking at the red vinyl. It's red. This is so cool. You know, this one's red.
And your dad was into jazz?
My dad was into jazz. My mom was into show music and country.
So how did you discover folk music?
My mom, there were some Pete Seeger records that my mom listened to. And when I was about 3 or 4, I was preschool. I wasn't in kindergarten yet. It was like one of the first summers that the Clearwater was sailing. And they docked at Steamboat Dock in Verplank. And it was in the newspaper, so my mom took me. It was not cold. You know, it was like just the end of summer. And there was an old guy with a banjo. And when I got to know Pete in his 80s, I never told him I thought he was an old guy in 1970 or whatever. But that was my take on it. And the closest thing we had really to folk music in the house was Johnny Cash. My mother loved Johnny Cash. And that stuck for me. But really it came about for me because I was into rock and roll. And I got into Dylan. And then Dylan sang Song for Woody. And I said, who's this Woody Guthrie guy? And I went and looked him up. He didn't have internet, obviously. This was the, you know, early 80s. But I ended up finding the book Bound for Glory. And I was hooked, you know. And then I talked to my grandfather, who was a UAW union organizer, and he had gotten fired by the WPA because he tried to organize. And he rode the rails for about a year. He went all over the country. And I learned about this, and I talked to him a bit. He had no interest in folk music. He probably might have been the person that like greeted the Almanac singers when they came to GM in Terrytown to sing. But he had no interest. He was into opera and classical music. So, so I got folk music through Dylan, really. But at the same time, I picked up, like, Delta blues. Old school Delta blues. And that music hit me like a ton of bricks, and I got really into it. And that came through, like, all the British bands that were doing that, like the Stones and the Led Zeppelin and stuff. And I would read the credits, and it would say Willie Dixon, W. Dixon, and then from Willie Dixon, it took me back to the acoustic stuff. But it was like, when I started playing music, as much as I love that music, that wasn't me. I was a future redneck from Verplank. And I heard Woody Guthrie, and I was like, man, this guy sounds like where I'm from. He really sounds like, you know, like he's from where I'm from. He
spoke to you somehow in the lyrics, in the style, in the causes,
primitiveness of it, and because you know, like I said, my dad was pushing me to jazz, and I love jazz, but it's so complicated and complex, and the chords are complicated, and I just don't feel music that way. I feel it as a savage banging on a rock with a stick. That's the way music gets me. When I was young, I was into a lot of like progressive rock and heavy metal, which was very complicated, and I love that music, but I kind of steered away from that towards this, a person stomping their foot and banging on a acoustic instrument like a drum. That really got me. So, but really, I have to say, rock and roll was like my religion. It was the thing that made me get up in the morning in high school and show up and not end up in jail or whatever, So it was really, and then as I started playing music, I realized like, well, we got to record it now, right? We wrote a song. The band wrote a song. We have to record it. How can we do this? So you get like one little tape recorder with one little microphone, and you find out you're too loud for it, and then you do all sorts of stuff. Well, let's put the tape recorder in the other room, and then you're like, oh, it sounds all echoey, and that's how it started.
So you were trying to actually make a living as a musician. Did the concept of starting your own recording studio develop at the same time as another income stream?
No, it was more in the early 90s. I made a record on a 4-track cassette recorder, and this other guy heard it, and he said, wow, that's cool. I want to do that with you. And then I said, okay, well, let's do it. And then we recorded his album, and he put it out, and he got reviewed in Sing Out magazine, all these magazines I never got reviewed in, Dirty Linen. And then, it sort of grew out of that. It really just was like, next thing you know, I had people coming to me saying, well, I got $200. Could we make a record? And I was like, well, yeah, all I have is these 2 microphones and this little tape recorder, but if we position them right, we can get a good sound, So it was like that.
So it was all self-taught,
it was all
learning
self-taught.
As you go.
And then I was in a rock band called the Rain Deputies, and I got to spend a lot of time in studios that way and just being a fly on the wall. So that was like my early... And the first band I ever recorded with was with a guy named Jim Reeves. He had built his own mixing console, because he had worked at the CBS studios, and then he worked for the record plant, and he recorded like a lot of 1970s live albums at Madison Square Garden. So he was like real techie. He built his own console, and he had all this gear that he sort of was working on, So that was my first experience. And that experience was very much like a 1984 experience where it was like, you have to record every track separate. You have to sing it and get one word at a time to get it perfect. And I walked out of that thinking, I don't ever want to do it like that. This is horrible. I hate this. So that was sort of where I came from. I started to like figure out how you could make much more old school, it was in the 80s, so it was like, I was hearing records, punk records, and I was like, these records sound good to me. These messy, terrible sounding records, they sound great. Like the Dead Kennedys, I'd hear that, and the Joel Biafra is screaming about Reagan and Thatcher. And I was like, this is cool. I like this. This is the kind of records I want to make.
So when did Woody's house come to be?
So Woody's house came to be, it's funny, my parents bought this property in 1987, and I remember saying, my dad tells me that I told him, I had moved out of the house, I was living in this little apartment, and I came over here, I was like, are you going to do anything with that barn? That would be a great recording studio. But it didn't actually happen until about 2000 or 2001. So it was a while. I was in a band, and we had a little space in Dobbs Ferry in this industrial building for a bunch of years. And then I had a little garage in Peekskill. Then I moved in here when my dad moved his business off of the property. So it was like this space freed up. And I think he even called me up. And he said, hey, I got to get the business off the property because people are driving me crazy. I'm buying a building. I don't really need to use this the barn space anymore. So I came in and did some work here, and I was in this room for a while, and then at some point, Steve Kirkman and Todd Judice helped me build the recording room back there. And like Steve and I spent days and days and days cutting up those wood floorboards and making the veneers and gluing them to the walls.
And why name it after Woody?
Well, the three of us who built the room, Woody Guthrie had brought us together because we had started Hope Machine, and Hope Machine was just a group that played Woody Guthrie songs, and we did programs for Nora Guthrie for the Woody Guthrie Foundation and Archives. And so I thought, I had been operating out of this room with a different name, and then I said, when we built that room, I want to rename it and make it a new thing. And so that was, it was like a reference to Woody Guthrie, but also it's all wood in there. So we figured, let's throw that in there too. So that was it. And since then, now it's been 15, 16 years, I've been just continuing to collect equipment, Like I have probably 40 microphones, and I have like brand new, really modern equipment, and I have 1950s equipment that I use every day that sounds great. That's the thing, I don't really discriminate in that way. But part of the room in there, part of the inspiration for the way we built it was this movie had come out, Buena Vista Social Club. And the album won the Grammy, and it was one of the greatest sounding albums I ever heard. And I remember I was on tour as a singer-songwriter, and I was in Chicago with my friend Ann Heaton, and her friend got in the car with us in Chicago, and she said, "You guys got to hear this CD I just got." And she put it in, and I heard the beginning of Buena Vista Social Club, and I just sat there and went, "Whoa, this sounds so good. This sounds like Nat King Cole records in the early '60s to me." And so we saw the movie, and as much as we could, we emulated that with the wood in the room. And they were in a much larger space, so it's different. That was it. And there used to be a lot of studios back that were built in that time period that were like this with wood and stuff, because there weren't any commercial treatments. It was just like if you see Sun Studios, they put a bunch of those ceiling tiles on the walls to kill it,
So who's recorded here? You must have a long list.
Oh man, Pete Seeger did this Weemaway thing here, which didn't end up getting used. Then I mixed one of his live recordings here, which also didn't get used. I've had like everything from singer-songwriters like Susan Kane and Kelly Flynn, and just recently I did a bunch of Christmas music with Elsa for the Hallmark Channel. I've done really great indie rock bands like Finn Folsom, this band from Brooklyn, that came in and did this great sounding recording. Dave Amram was here one time doing overdubs for John Flynn's record. I've done 2 movie scores, like real, a couple of them won at the festivals, won awards at the festivals. And then I've done lots of other little film bits and pieces, and I just recorded a local band called the DeMarco Brothers, and they did everything live from the floor, and it was all raw and wacky, and out of time and messed up. Just it goes on and on. I recorded Hudson Valley Sally, their EP and their new full-length album. Carolann Solobello did her 3 at her last 4 solo records here, and I did some stuff with Red Molly a little bit here too.
People hear about you as a musician through your recording success, and people hear about your recording from being a musician.
Yeah, I don't really separate being a recording engineer and or producer from being a musician. I sort of consider them to be one and the same in a way. And
do you think that helps? That everybody who does recording should be a musician?
no, not necessarily. I know some really good, and one of my buddies, Scott Hull, who runs Masterdisc, he's in Peekskill now, and he masters things like Sting and Paul Simon and Steely Dan. I mean, he's not really a musician, but his ears are just, they're gold. He hears, I mean, he's amazing.
What do you want for the future, musically, recording-wise?
I mean, recording-wise, I just more work. I want the industry to change so that people actually, so that music isn't so disposable as it is now. I think we went from a period where you bought a record and you owned it and you looked at the art and you read the credits and you sat in front of the speakers and you listened to it, to where people have music on a device and they listen to it for 45 seconds and they shut it off and they move on. I think that music is a big part of what makes us human, and we respond to music in a way that is so direct to the heart. And there's actually a new field of study called music cognizance that was founded by Susan Rogers, who was Prince's engineer for 4 years. She did Purple Rain. She did, that real area of Prince's career where it was just, he was young and he was working 20 hours a day. And she has studied the neurology of the ear and come to the conclusion that the simplicity of the ear versus, say, the eye is part of the reason why we react to music the way we do. So I'm fascinated by that, and I think that music is like, it's like religion to me. It's my religion. So it's the most sacred thing for me. It's the thing that I have a hard time being a human, but the one thing that keeps me in it is music. You know what I mean? It's like, so I just wish, I love that vinyl is coming back, because vinyl, you take it home and you live with it and you have it for the rest of your life. If you were in the house, you'd see all my records that I listened to. I mean, like, I had a band come in and get up, like this. These guys came in and they were like, we're doing it to vinyl, and we recorded this here, It was like, this was my first vinyl record that came out of this studio again, and there's going to be more. So I love that. I just, the idea that, that music is just something you make it on the worst sounding format that takes up the least space in your hard drive, and I'm glad people get music that way and stuff, but as a recording person, it drives me crazy, it just drives me crazy.
And finally, if Woody were here now, what do you think he'd make of all of this?
Woody would be like my friend Steve Kirkman. He would be a first taker. You better have the tape rolling for the first take, because after the first take, I think he would lose interest pretty quickly and move on, because he was that kind of artist, that kind of a person. I think the area where Woody really sat with it and really worked it was in his visual art. When you look at his visual art, I think he was much more able to sit still and put time into it. I think music for Woody was very much he was like running the whole time. He was running. He finished the song. He didn't even want to just put it on tape. He just wanted to get on to the next. He was like, seems like he was like this with, I think with his writing and his art, his visual art, he was a little more able to just sit, which kind of makes sense because music is visceral. And I think for Woody Guthrie, it was very visceral. I think it was about the way it felt, so. And
you've enjoyed connecting with his family.
I really enjoyed.
An honor.
It's, and particularly Anna, Woody's granddaughter. She's just so sweet, and Nora's great too. Nora's really smart, quirky, fun, kind human being. And her daughter Anna is great. And Anna's never been over here, but she gave me all this stuff to decorate the studio. So. But yeah, I really love that Woody Guthrie is sort of through all of it, everything that happens here. And people come into the studio and they look around and they go, wow, And then I have microphones living here that are from the CBS 30th Street studios through my friend Jim Keyes, whose dad worked there. And those microphones also connect people with this sense of history and this sense of like the golden age of recording. And you bring up a picture on the internet of Bob Dylan standing in the Columbia studios, one of those big boom stands with an M49 hanging on it, and you say, well, that could be one of these mics. They owned about 12 of them, so we've got 2 of them. So it's cool, But I do wish that Woody Guthrie had gotten a chance to really record more. Most of what we have was in Mo Ash's office, rushing through the stuff to make it fit on a wax cylinder. I think, but like I said, I think he would have had to come in and he's just first take, So.
Is that what you wanted? Is that what you wanted?
It's the kind of stuff. I mean, was this any good? All right, cool.
Incredible.
All right.
I guess he's happy.
Yeah.
I almost was going to interrupt you like 15 minutes ago because you said something about my favorite kind of music is it sounds like a mess and they're just all doing it. And I'm like, oh, that's why he likes Hudson Valley Sally.
Well, you guys have that balance though, between order and chaos. Like it's really, like when we were at the Crown Choir the other day, that America the Beautiful thing that we did at the beginning.
Yes.
We never even rehearsed that. We never even tried that. Like I got there all jet lagged and they said, Steve, and even Amy, who's usually very she's used to doing things the more normal way people do it now and doing it over and over again and getting it perfect. But even she was like, Fred, we got this idea. I swear we did it before. And I was like, I don't think so. We want you to sing America the Beautiful. You get it started and then we're just going to come in and we're going to see what happens. And it was like, that was what we did.
It was pretty magical.
It was like, but you guys have that balance between, I think that there's this little balance beam between order and chaos, and I think that when you look at somebody like Paul Simon does so many takes that he works through perfectionism and gets to the other side, right? But I think what happens in music now, because of our methodology when we record it, is that people do a dozen takes. So take 2 through 12 are horrible because you're just bored. You're just not into it. Take 1 is great, but it's a mess. If you keep going though, you eventually get the Beatles, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, take 65 or something. They finally got back around, and George Harrison almost quit over it. He was like, leave me alone. It's not going to get any better, but... So, I mean, I think you guys, Hudson Valley Sally walks a line between order and chaos. You work out the harmonies, you got 4-part harmony, and you really work it out. But I think you have space for being in the moment a little bit. And that's, not many people can kind of get it tight like that and still have some looseness. And that Buena Vista Social Club thing is done like jazz music. There's a very definite structure to everything. Everybody knows the structure, but they're just doing their thing within that structure. So, I don't know. I think, I also think that people who perceive what they do as being a mess, a lot of times are just being very self-critical. And I think a lot of people who perceive what they're doing as achieving perfection are actually fooling themselves. what they don't have is, it's like I have a sign on the wall in there. It's from Aristotle. It's as perfect as the enemy of good, because it is. If you make perfect art, you know, I would be the first one to just fall asleep in the middle of it. You know what I mean?
Loses its soul.
It loses its soul. You know, so it's art, making art. It's like when you write, the first draft is, if you're that type of writer, the first draft, you don't think about it. You just write it. Then you go back and you work on it and you work on it and you work on it. And I think that's a good illustration of how it works, how making art is supposed to work. You have to give the subconscious and the heart and everything a chance to run. But then you also have to take all of that and channel it and use your skills to make it into something that works, you know? So I always think that that's the balance. And I often will get the tape rolling even before it's really ready, before we really got sounds, because somebody will get a great thing, great performance, and I never want to be the engineer that says, well, I didn't record that. You know, like, you know, that's the person you never want to be. I always want to be the person who doesn't get in the way of the art, but helps the art to happen, you know. So, and I can remember in the 80s being in a band, and you'd have like these like managers and record company people would come, and you couldn't work, you know, like you couldn't, and then you had to buy them lunch, you know, and it was like, and finally, like, at a certain point, I remember having a conversation with some manager or somebody, and just basically we closed the door to the studio and we locked it, and we said, you're not allowed. You're not allowed here. And they were screaming and yelling, we're paying for this and stuff. And it was like, you're not allowed here. You do your job, we'll do our job. You know, so, I don't know. It's interesting. We don't have to worry about that now. There aren't any managers or record companies.
I think some of this would be perfect to put on your website as promotional.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Because
yeah.
I used to think you were shy.
I actually really am shy.
Nah,
But-
all I had to do was get you started. And you.
Well, that's the thing. If you talk about this, I'm not
Yeah,
shy. You know
It's
what I
great.
mean? It's because it's, and all this stuff. I never thought I'd be a gearhead, but look at this crap.
Well, and it
Crazy.
wasn't all. It didn't happen all at once. It was gradual over the years.
And like microphones, whether I have the money or not, I am watching microphones on eBay at all times and trying to get good deals. Like, I don't know if you looked in the cabinet in there, but it's the microphone thing, because the microphone it's the most important part of the signal chain. It's basically, you know, that's the thing between the musician and the tape.
And there's
right?
that much difference between
There's
them?
that much difference. Literally, when I work with Jeff Irich, he's producing and I'm just the engineer. He'll say, we're going to record this 12-string acoustic guitar track. I'll say, where's it going? And he'll say, okay, I want it to be sort of a little bit thin and harpsichord-y, because it's going to go on the right side of the mix, and it's going to be this little part. Okay, and I'll go in there and I'll pick out 2 microphones based on what he just said that give me the vibe he's going for, you know. So that's, you just look at them and you think, wow, these things must do really different stuff, you know. I mean, yeah, this is great pressure zone microphone. I use this all the time. So, you know.
I know nothing about
Yeah, I mean,
recording after talking to you.
These are the ears. These are the ears. So this is like the, it's probably sort of the way a cat hears. And this is the way, like, Scott Hull, my friend who does the mastering, like, he hears everything. So this is probably that. And this is the way, like, records in 1972, this is the way they sounded. This is the way this thing hears. You know, so... yeah, I became a gearhead somewhere over there. That's what's cool too, is like I'm really into primitive music, but I'm really into this technical stuff, the gear and the way it works and everything. So it's almost like the left brain, right brain thing, right? Like when I play music, I'm all on one side of the brain, and when I record music, I'm sort of reminding that side of the creative side, like, there's all this analytical crap. Maybe you should reel that in and use it. So I think in that sense too, I think doing this work is good for me as an artist. I think it really, it sort of. So all right, I'm gonna stop talking now because you ask an Irish person, even if they're shy, about something they're interested in. This is what you get.
That's exactly what I wanted. So bravo.
My bio on Facebook says 101 words for a bio for an Irish person. Are you kidding?